to the coach and the therapist in in conversation.
Yes,
I'm Coach Kev, the dating and relationship coach,
I'm the therapist.
and we're here to talk about ghosting today. And we have to admit, we want to apologize. We did a little test to ghost our audience to see if you guys would still show up, but seemed like you guys are committed and loyal. We like it.
You believe that we had good intentions,
So thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
and that's not always easy.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. So appreciate you all showing up. We actually had technical difficulties.
Yes.
Neither Chris or I can say, are, technically,
Inclined.
inclined or savants when it comes to technology. We do have assistants. However, it's been a bit of a challenge today.
Yeah. But you know what? This is what we talk about in coaching and in therapy, right? Life is ever moving, and we all just try to be flexible around it. And we appreciate that from y'all too. Do you have to move the participants off to the side?
I do.
For your-
I do.
Okay,
I do. Sorry about that.
that's okay.
Yep.
So y'all,
Go ahead.
today's topic is ghosting, the disappearing act and its impact.
Yep, and a worthy topic, because as a coach and you probably as a therapist have
All the
plenty of
time.
clients talk about ghosting and definitely how they feel when it happens to them. And it's a hot topic. It happens very frequently. It's very pervasive in our culture. And
Yeah.
we thought, boy, let's open it up and dive in and get your questions as well as share some thoughts and ideas. And
We know some of y'all have stories out there about ghosting, so we want to hear those too.
Yep. So how should we kick it off? Do we need to define ghosting, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. How do you define it?
I think it's kind of multi-layered, right? And so depending on how you are kind of impacted by what happens, you might see it differently. Now, in the past, I would have thought ghosting. That's kind of when you start a conversation and then they disappear. That's ghosting. I actually kind of don't feel that way quite anymore. I kind of feel like because of our culture and the implications around kind of dating online and having all those apps and options, that if you have a conversation with someone and it's just like, hey, saw your picture, you're cute or something, and you say, oh yeah, you too. And then you don't hear from them again, right? That's not really ghosting as I would see it. In my mind, it's kind of like if you feel like there is the possibility of a connection, right? Not necessarily a deep one, but just a possibility of a connection that might warrant kind of more conversation or, hanging out. And then that is gone. You're talking back and forth for a couple of days and then the person literally disappears and you never hear from them again. That's kind of one way in which you see this pop up. But I think the other way in which you really see this pop up is when you actually are involved in something deeper. When you talk with a person several times a week, when you see each other multiple times a week, when there almost seems to be kind of a pattern that you can rely on, right? And then suddenly the pattern is disrupted and the person is gone. And you try to reach out, you go the various means that you used to, they're gone, but they're not gone necessarily to everybody. They're just definitely gone and no longer interacting with you. Now, the thing with ghosting that's interesting, right, is that it doesn't have to happen after there's been some argument, after there's been some serious disruption in whatever flow y'all have going, right? You can think everything's amazing. You can have no indication. And I don't mean like, oh, there were red flags. I mean, you're chilling, you think they're chilling too. Then the next day you go to call, they don't answer. You DM, they don't answer. You email, they don't answer, right? And you still see that they're active and engaged in other ways. That is like a prime example of being ghosted. What would you add to that?
I like the way you described it to a T. I think it's multi-layered.
Yep.
I think it's always existed. We just gave it a term.
Yeah.
I mean, ghosting existed back in the day when there wasn't as much device communication or no device communication.
True.
You can meet somebody at the club, get the number, talk to them for a minute, and then, hey, they stop calling.
Yes, absolutely.
All right? You don't hear from them again. There's no contact. There's no understanding why. There's no explanation.
But okay, here's my question though. don't you feel like it's a little almost easier and more accepted to do that now because of that swipe culture where people almost get used to, I hate to use this word, but people almost get used to being dismissed,
Yeah,
kind of, passed over. You were relevant, now you aren't. I don't know.
I agree. I think dismissed, disposable. I think, just because there's so many options, we're like, okay. And it can be difficult to share that, hey, I'm not interested, or I'm married and I got to let you go and I don't need to tell you. Whatever the reason, I feel some people,
If you want on our conversation about cheating, marriage and step it out came up several times for Kev. So I don't just,
my point is, some people find it hard to communicate.
Absolutely.
And ghosting is a form of communication by not communicating.
Absolutely.
Right? And so they, and then I feel that some women, I've heard anecdotally that, hey, some men can be very, how can I put it? Very rude, very, they reject them. They don't know how to handle it. So it's easier to ghost than to have to, convey the rejection message or, be transparent about how they feel about how things have progressed and they're no longer interested. And some men get belligerent. So therefore they're like, you know what? It's maybe better for him if I just disappear.
Now see,
become a ghost.
Okay, you guys I almost don't necessarily feel like that's ghosting in the same way. That is an abrupt end of communication. But the reason is because this person is you're concerned, right? About how this person is going to respond. And they've kind of let you know in the past, they respond very verbally aggressively. So you're like, okay, I'm just going to I'm going to avoid that. Now, Sharon just said, someone who just joined just said ghosting is a form of cowardice. And I would say, I think cowardice is an interesting word. And on the one hand, I feel where you're coming from, because it's like, if you no longer want this, if you no longer want to spend time, if you decided maybe it's not the right time, whatever the reason, you can say that, right? Without worrying that I'm not necessarily going to be able to accept that. To your point, everybody always can. But I do think that there is, I think that there is an area of ghosting that has a lot to do with the person's either challenges, or in other words, it comes across as dismissive, or they're kind of taking you for granted and moving on. But I do think sometimes maybe, you've tapped into a very serious vulnerability for them. Maybe they didn't think they were going to like somebody so much, they weren't prepared. And instead of kind of being able to acknowledge that, share that with you, the fear around that is so great that they run instead and put up a wall. And in that sense, coward, feels a bit trickier, right? At other times, I do think very much active cowardice. What do you think?
No, I definitely think there's, there's elements and there's, rationale as I talk to clients on why they might, do the ghosting themselves or how they feel being ghosted and what they glean from it. There's a lot of things, but I think for us, it's basically that the basic thing is someone goes no contact at some point in time for simplistic purposes, and you don't know why. You're kind of left wondering what happened, right? Did they get hit by a bus? Are they not prepared? Are they just cowardly? Can they not deliver hard messages? There's a whole lot of questions and confusion is what I get. People looking for answers.
Yeah.
Why did they ghost me?
Well, and I think that's the most interesting piece, because so often with ghosting, what you are left with after you run it in your head, after you talk about it with all your friends, after everybody's analyzed as much as possible, right? What you're left with is often having to really come to a place of a resolution for yourself. At the end of the day, I think you almost begin to have to make peace with the idea that somebody to mute.
You can get to the opera savings better than not. It's not great, but
Okay.
Great.
Okay, let's see. What was that?
Yep.
Oh, yes. I think one of the biggest challenges about about that is that you often have to find your own resolution around what occurred. And it doesn't matter how much you ruminate, it doesn't matter how you share with friends, what they say, how they felt about the person if they met them, right? At the end of the day, what is concrete and what is absolute is that this person is gone. Now, they may or may not come back on the scene. I've seen where somebody talks to somebody every single day for 5 months, daily, right? Multiple times a day. And then they were gone for 9 months. And then suddenly they pop back up without any necessarily real explanation. Now, at that point, you might decide, this is telling me something, right? About the character of this person. This is telling me something about the integrity that they move with. And if they can't kind of accept responsibility or give an explanation, even if you decide to kind of stay in it, what you have to know is that you're seeing something.
Right.
Yeah. And the likelihood is that that will repeat itself unless the person has learned to move differently and handle themselves differently. But if they did, when they came back, they will be able to discuss that with you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Mhm.
We got some feedback as well, and I'm adding some folks, but working the mic as well here. So Sharon, definitely, you're saying there's nuance to it, no doubt. And the time it happened to you, looks like you did an exercise where you wrote a strongly worded note to the person, right? And then saying everything you wanted to say, then you burned it, you torched it, got it off your chest. No doubt, no doubt.
As long as you didn't torch any of your chest or anybody else, that's a helpful coping strategy.
No doubt. No doubt. I think, part of the challenge, as you know, if you've been ghosted and the impact and how you feel, it's tough. I mean, we call it the disappearing act. Someone's disappearing that you were developing a connection with. So there was like, okay, what did I trigger this? There's a questioning of yourself.
Yeah, there's
right.
a lot of questions.
And you're wondering, like, what did I do? Do I need to do some course correction? Is something I need to change? Or because it happens a lot on online dating. It can be a few exchanges, and like Chris was mentioning, there's levels to it. I think that the early engagement, if you text and they stop talking, everybody accepts, hey,
you're just like,
life
they swipe
happens.
10 more times, somebody else.
Right. But it's when you've been on a few dates or a few FaceTimes and a couple of calls, and and you've gotten a chance to really connect, and you're saying this person seems interested. Then they ghost.
Yeah. They're making just as much effort as you are. If it was very mutual, and then they disappear. You're like, wait a minute, what? And I think to your point, because it's kind of a break in, what seems to be a pattern forming, right? Even though we don't you manage your expectations when you're just starting something new, but when it seems to be a bit of a pattern forming, you get used to something and then there's a disappearance. Because it's so abrupt, it can feel extremely jarring, and you are left with a lot of questions.
Right.
You really begin to do a lot of self-examination, and it can take a lot then to not begin to internalize.
Exactly.
How is this possible that somebody could just disappear? I either didn't see something, maybe there was something I should have done differently. Somehow I wasn't enough will come into play, and all this kind of negative self-talk and that inner critic might begin to show itself, especially because part of what you're doing at that point is really expressing the sadness and the disappointment, and it's kind of coming out through that lens.
Fair enough. No doubt. I see Charmaine, they probably did you a favor, undoubtedly, no doubt. Helping yourself to say, hey, this probably was the best thing, given that they showed this behavior now as opposed to down the line. Because I've been privy to situations where people have dated for 2 or 3 years, engaged, and got ghosted. So you kind of think about, it's one thing to be rejected, it's another thing how you did it, and then given the tenure, it sure feels like it cuts a lot deeper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no way you cannot question. And because, again, there isn't that person to just ask.
Right.
Now, of course, even if you ask, they might not give you the real answer.
Right. Exactly.
But your sense is that you've had a conversation.
Right.
Okay, I have to put this, I kind of have to compartmentalize this right now. And kind of move forward. And I think the other thing that happens is that if it's happened to you on multiple occasions, part of that internalization is you do start to wonder, okay, is there something that I'm doing? Is there something in, am I choosing a certain kind of person, right?
Right.
Who it feels more comfortable kind of doing the dismissing when it happens multiple times. And the other piece of this, right, is that how do you continue to move in that dating realm? Because now there is a sense that you can't quite necessarily trust what you're experiencing, right?
Right.
Because the disappearance happens and you were not prepared at all. So now when you meet someone and they're being remotely consistent, it's kind of like, yeah, but will you talk to them again in a week or in 2 weeks? And so you have to manage kind of this combination of managing the enthusiasm that you might feel, right? With the reality that you are going to have to just kind of stay present and enjoy absolutely just what your experience is in the moment. If you guys have great conversation and you laugh, then what you're getting from that at that point is laughter, right?
Right.
Versus thinking, man, in a couple of weeks, I think I'm going to invite them to the whatever. No one's saying be negative in any way, or now you shouldn't believe in anything. Absolutely not. But I think that if you've been ghosted multiple times, there is a sense that you really just have to kind of stay present in whatever way you're engaging, and then be aware that it might be something that you end up having to release.
Yeah, great points, great points. I see a comment in the chat. Can you all speak a bit on the healthy ways one might move forward after being ghosted once or even multiple times? And that's leading directly where we're going.
Mhm.
How to handle the impact, as well as maybe how to prevent it from happening. I got some thoughts on
Oh, you
that.
think about preventing?
I think about preventing it.
I don't know, y'all.
I got
That's-
ways to help
okay.
clients prevent being ghosted.
What are they?
Ghost
Don't
them
date.
first? No. You ghost them first. You're like, wait, hold on. You can't ghost me if I ghost you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Everybody knows I like to joke and have fun. But the impact, no doubt. I think, Chris, you might attest, I think, processing what you're feeling, because clients come with a range of emotions and they
Right.
go through a range of emotions, from
Absolutely.
anger to confusion to frustration to guilt
Sadness,
to sadness to
disappointment,
shame. Like,
Mhm.
I think it's a range. So I kind of, let's give them space to feel those emotions. And then I think the part you mentioned earlier, I'm gonna stop here, is that lots of questions and you don't have the person
Yeah.
to ask
Yep.
to say, what is it? Or even,
Mhm.
can I get my stuff back? I mean, that comes up a lot.
Quietly.
I think
Yeah.
we
I
get my
mean,
stuff
if
back.
you've been hanging for a while and then, yeah.
Seriously,
you
that
get
has
stuff back.
happened and clients have come. So how do I get my stuff back? They won't answer. I go to the house. They don't, it's like they moved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep.
So I think the first step is kind of recognizing that you're human,
Mhm.
one, and that it's okay to feel this way,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I was going to add, when you said kind of frustrated, angry, sad, all those things, I think what Charmaine is speaking to is a sense of kind of a little bit of hopelessness that can begin to kind of permeate how you move when you're trying to date or just even get to know people, right? Is this kind of how this goes now? Is this kind of this behavior that I just really have to accept? And will there be this thing, that I see other people have? So it does happen, but will there be this thing where there's this kind of continuity and an actual building of some sort? And then if it ends quite naturally, well, okay, that's fine. That's the experience of a relationship. They can be healthy.
Right.
Sometimes, that kind of the mutual gain, or one person grows in one way, one person grows in another way, and then it ends.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yay, I have to have my grieving process, but I know
Right.
exactly what happened and I
Right.
can move into the next. But I think, to your point about just being able to kind of process what's occurred, because again, because it's so jarring, it's almost like, okay, wait a minute, what? Okay, no, did that just happen? I'm gonna try to call one more time. Nope. Oh
Right.
no, they're really not answering, right?
Right.
And that process and kind of talking it through with friends can kind of help to just kind of rid yourself of
Right.
it eventually. And then, what you'll find kind of like in situations, if you've never been ghosted, but you've had pleasant relationships and they end,
Yeah.
you will find yourself kind of venturing back into that space quite naturally, because, finding romantic connection is one of those things that usually, despite people's fear and vulnerabilities, they find themselves leaning towards and still wanting.
Yeah, makes
Mhm.
sense. I think another tip or another idea I have is, asking what would give you closure, because you're not going to get it from the ghost.
Mhm.
The ghost is disappeared. So thinking about what might give you closure. And I think someone mentioned, hey, writing down what I would say to them and then burning it, torching it. That might be some level of closure and giving you the closure that you would need, because that's it. You don't have any closure. You've been rejected with no closure.
Yeah, but you know what I also think? The other piece of this, which, we were talking about, which is kind of like that you really have to uh you reach for your own resolve around it, is that I think that this is a time when doing a lot of work on, centering yourself, on affirming yourself, of reminding yourself of your value,
Right.
can also become really key. And then, maybe trying different things with friends, finding a way to kind of feel, kind of rejuvenated and excited about life again can also kind of help to uh, lessen the impact of that person disappearing, because it's a reminder, right, that there's so much more out there. It's a reminder that while this was hard and challenging and hurtful, oh wow, there really is kind of this whole world.
Right.
There's so much more about this and about me, which is a little bit different than being like, his loss, because that's not real, or her loss or their loss. You're going to feel that for a second, then you're going to be like
Yeah.
in bed at night at 3 a.m, like,
Yeah.
no, I just don't.
Yeah, no doubt.
Mhm.
That still will come back.
Mhm.
I used to think they got hit by a bus and feel sorry for them. And you missed out.
Why is it a bus? It's been a bus twice. It seems like a violent kind of death. I mean,
Okay.
it doesn't seem like you're
It's
really
a lot
finding
harder to get
peace.
hit by an airplane. That's why. That's why it's a bus. It's a lot harder to get. I mean, you get hit by a train.
Why can't they just be hit by like a Mini Cooper and then they're in the
Okay, a
hospital
Mini
trying to
Cooper,
recoup,
a Mini Cooper.
It just feels like maybe
Yes.
some of your frustration is being channeled into
Yeah,
their
yes.
cause of death. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, and we got some comments. Let me
Yeah.
scroll back up here. I saw Diane wanted to share a story here. You were ghosted, date plan never confirmed. Heard from him a year later when he called to apologize and let me know he came back from the dead. No, my bad. He was going through some hardship
Yeah.
and he should not have been dating to begin with.
That's why you got ghosted.
Yeah.
You're not able to read the sentence.
I can't read, but we're friends to this day. Well, that's a great story. That technically is a ghost that no longer haunts you. He came back from the dead, Diane, and that's a beautiful thing, I suppose, right? And you're friends to this day. So
Yeah.
applaud you on being open.
Yeah, to the return.
Yes.
But why she could, right, was
Right.
because there was an honesty in the return.
Makes
and so then
sense.
that made it easy to be able to trust that possibly this person would do it. And I have to side note this. That was just a little joke we said about because there's
About what?
well, because there are people who, aren't able to read or have issues with
Right,
reading. And
right,
so
yeah. But
my therapist brain is like, wait.
Yeah.
I want to make sure everybody feels
yes,
emotionally safe in this space.
I was just adding a little humor to the content.
This was I,
Okay,
just doing
all
a
right.
little side note,
Let's get to it. Sharon, we appreciate it. The best is running into the person in public and ignoring them. Ha ha ha. All right, Sharon. Sharon's like, I see you. I thought you were a ghost, but now you're alive. You came back. So people do come back. You know that.
People do come back around. I almost think I like the first part of that, running into them.
Right.
But I would like kind of to run into them and say hi as if,
Yeah.
it didn't even, you know what I mean?
Didn't even phase you.
Hmm.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
I like
Charmaine.
having my best heels at that time too, though. You know what I mean? You don't
Alright.
want to run into them raggedy. That's
Right,
the only
right,
thing.
right.
Yeah,
The old folks say the best revenge is to live well.
I like it. That's what we were talking about.
Well said. I like it. Thank you for sharing, Charmaine. Let's get to Casey. I may have missed this, but did we talk about some of
We did, Case. Where
Yeah.
were you? I said
Yeah.
one of the things that we would have to look at would be,
Right.
is there something in my choosing? Is there something I'm trying to compensate for? Is there a role I'm used to being in that has me kind of really continuing to move back into the same kind of type of person. So there always has to be some level of self-reflection. And then I think, it's important to kind of, then kind of talk that through with someone, because sometimes when we're so shocked around something, I've seen this happen many times, we absorb the blame, right? And it absolutely isn't all of ours. And so careful self-reflection, I would say.
No doubt, no doubt. Charmaine, you bring up a great topic. Can we talk about the danger of ghosting these days? There have been a lot of unfortunate and deadly situations in the news. Yeah, I can see it going bad, ghosting some people.
Wait, I have a question. Charmaine, do you mean that in response to being ghosted, people respond in a violent way? Is she muted?
We
Oh,
can take you off of mute, Charmaine. Let me see if I can do this. If you're interested in sharing, okay, there you go. What are you speaking about?
Hi, yes, that's exactly what I mean. There've been, at least here in Houston, several instances in the news of someone being ghosted most often time, or someone ghosting or trying to flee a relationship, most often the woman, and then the man responding violently.
Yeah, I'm chiming in here. I've heard of those instances as well. Charmaine, you and I are in sync on this, because I've heard of those instances. It's almost as if there are, and I don't know if it's generational, but it's as if people can't take rejection.
Yes.
So it becomes quite dangerous. I know that rejection falls a little differently than ghosting, but I think what Charmaine, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking you're saying that some women may be fearful and just not want anything to do with the person, and then it escalates into a scary situation or pattern.
Exactly. And the strange thing, it seems the pattern is, these were not even long-term relationships. Case in point, the 6 o'clock news today, a man that had been seeing a woman for 8 years, I think it was a 36-year-old woman, 50-year-old man, unfortunately killed her in her apartment. Not sure that it was ghosting, but she did try to break up with him because he had been violent. And, unfortunately, it ended that way. But to her point, again, I think it's the fact that people can't take rejection. And, as you alluded to earlier, sometimes women may not want to have that confrontation and just think it's best to leave.
Yeah. So can we talk to the danger? No, I think, yeah, it's dangerous dating, I feel, in general. Ghosting, maybe the manifestation of it can put you at risk for certain things, I suppose. But how does one manage that? That's a tough one to me.
This feels very layered, for many reasons. Charmaine, I think you were on the session when we talked about when you're kicking it with someone who exhibits narcissistic traits, for example, right?
Yes, I think.
I think she said yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. And this is not, and Casey said something interesting, not blaming, right? And so, but she said, there's sometimes when I've had to realize that I may not have been as open with my feelings, right? And so I'm doing this very delicately. I think what Charmaine's speaking to is even goes so far beyond ghosting.
Exactly.
I think we're speaking to a situation where people are extremely reactive to what they perceive as any form of rejection, and either they have some attachment issues and have attached everything to the idea of this person. And so whether it's 2 weeks, a month, to your point, they just say no about dating, there is maybe either some delusion or obsession at work there, so that in their minds, their reaction matches, right, the situation. Now, it never does. I'm not in any way saying that you can understand in the context how violence would be. No, I don't mean that. I'm just saying that, I think when you go there, there's a lot else happening, for the person in who's doing the violence. And then unfortunately, the victims, I don't know, sometimes you can't always get a sense of kind of how people cope with things, how they accept differences in communication or differences in values or differences in interests, all these things, right? But I also think sometimes it's tricky with dating and with love, because I think that people become invested and there's so much hope in maybe what they initially saw of this person, if they were charming, for example, that it's a little bit harder to kind of immediately remove yourself. There's a sense of kind of trying to give somebody another chance sometimes, if you see a couple of things that aren't necessarily what you'd like them to be. But again, my only point around that is that this becomes very layered in terms of kind of the violence and how that happens. And it's always wrong. And so I'm not in any way saying, well, the victim should have known. I don't mean that. I just mean that you can see how with people's vulnerabilities and desire for connection and love, that we
Yep.
might look past one or two of the things that happen, thinking, oh, but that's not their normal response. Anger isn't the way they normally respond. They're normally considerate and this and that, and they were just having a bad day. Let me stay in this because the other pieces of this are so good, right? Or they say that they really wish that, you could only spend time with them because they are just enjoying you so much. And that feels like a compliment. When in reality, it's kind of the first nod to a bit of clinginess and a bit of control. You know what I mean? So Charmaine, this runs pretty deep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like something you can't gauge. That there's something that flips. Yeah, that switches. Well, that went dark.
Yeah, but it's real and we
Not
appreciate.
in a funny way. I didn't mean to laugh, but
No, we definitely appreciate you bringing it up and making us aware of it. Yeah, I've heard a lot of incidents about situations not going well from dating experiences online and in general. And I think it's always been there.
Absolutely.
I think now it's, I don't know if it's worse or we've had more incidents or not. That's a question, but I try to encourage, safety, trusting your intuition, always making sure that someone knows where you are and who you're dating. And even as a guy, I mean, I check in. I check in just because you never know. So I'm trying to be safe and let people know, like I'm meeting someone new for the first time. Hey, man, if I don't talk to you by end of the night or tomorrow, call the cops.
And also,
Call somebody.
Yeah, because also, there's a feeling when there's kind of, a nice feel, you're enjoying each other. It might start with that outdoor coffee.
Right.
But oh my God, this is so fun. Who knew? Let's go for a walk. Let's whatever. And in the end, the boundary that you set up for yourself, which was I'm meeting this person for about an hour in public.
Right.
And I'm driving my own car, right? Turns into something very different. Yeah. And so you do have to be really careful and kind of stick to what your initial plan is for meeting.
you guys touch on a point. I
Go ahead.
think online dating and also social media. I think there is definitely a disconnection in human emotion. And I think it also leads to people feeling like they can just ghost people. I absolutely think that there's that people don't know how to communicate because they're constantly spending time online. And
Right.
there's it's just like a disconnection in terms of emotion. And I think it's exactly what is happening.
No doubt. So I can comment on that. But before I do, the last point though, I think to your other point, I think when things are great, you get to see a side of a person. When there's adversity, not everybody can respond and handle it well, even when it's adversity with that person. And then you start to see a certain behavior that you're like, wait, so you're blindsided at times too. You never know. But to your question about social media,
It's actually dismissal.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, the thought is social media made us more social. And one could argue, boy, I don't know about that, right? It definitely made us more, digital. And we can see and connect with people all over the world or but are we more social as a result of it? and it would become less human and emotionally connected because now we're reduced to a tweet or a two-dimensional picture or whatever it may be. And there's a level of disconnectedness I see, or I even feel at times.
Mhm.
And there comes the dismissiveness or the disposalness, and you can just literally, hey, now you see me, now you don't online. What's the big deal?
Well, and I think too, what happens in terms of the way that we are shaped around this, right? Is that their curated image, our expectations of what we should kind of, be able to date or strive for are different. Instead of seeing kind of one cool looking cat, they're like 10 cool looking cats. And so again, that sense with the online dating is that, okay, we'll just on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And so there's almost a sense that there is kind of permission to do that. There's permission, right? There's this person or there's like 80 other people. But separately, social media, I think when you look at what has happened to our expectations, what happens to our mental health when we kind of get involved in comparison or longing for the curated image, and then possibly really miss out on the opportunity for real connections because we're striving for something that maybe previously we wouldn't have been thinking of. It wouldn't have kind of been on our radar,
Yep.
Yeah.
Good point.
Mhm.
Good point. Great question about social media and the impact. And I think part of it, the question is, are we becoming conditioned to, ghosting as a societal norm? Like at some level of the layers that you mentioned to start the conversation about ghosting, it seems like at that initial layer, everybody's accepted that you can ghost if you haven't met on the first chat. It's
No, remember,
yeah,
listen, when we started, my thought was the idea of ghosting is layered. And
Right.
in fact, if you kind of have back and forth dialogue for a day or two, and then the person disappears, it's almost like that isn't even ghosting anymore because that
Right.
happens so frequently, right? We're kind of looking more at a sense of possibility, a sense of connection, shared interest, etc. Hey, it'd be really great for us to meet soon, etc. And then
yeah,
the disappearance, and taking that, and it's a spectrum, and going all the way to your point. I was married to somebody for 10 years. I woke up one morning.
right.
I thought we were happy. They rolled out.
No contact.
I never heard from them again. Right.
Right. Cuts a lot deeper.
Which is
Yeah,
different than leaving an unsafe situation. I just want to preface.
no
I'm
doubt.
not prefacing so much tonight.
Well, you want to let us know what your context. I think, it's like, I feel like in society though, like for example, if you ever interview for a job, you put the time in, you interview, and then they don't let you know if you got the job or not. You just.
Oh my God, they
That's like
did not.
ghosting.
You have been ghosted.
You submitted your resume, you think you qualified, nobody lets you.
You
know
have the
what
conversation.
conversation, and then you disappear.
And,
Like,
and you do the reach back out. Thank you so much for the whatever.
Right,
I found this experience, such and such. If
Did I
you could
get
just
the
let me
job?
know. Yeah.
am I in? Am I out? Like, did you pick someone else? I don't know. It's a weird dynamic.
Which goes back to the idea that there's so many options, so many candidates.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Your assumption has to be that they
Right.
just decided on somebody else. And sometimes,
No,
it really-
Societal norms. And I mean,
yeah, sometimes it really isn't that. You know
Right,
what I mean? I
right.
have to go back to, in terms of mental health, when people experience, for example, a depressive episode, or anxiety is really heightened around that time, for example, they might have been really engaged and they might have had every intention, right, of kind of wanting to get to know you. But now there's almost been a pause, not just with you, but kind of in every aspect of their lives, right? And you guys aren't at that point where they're going or even want to necessarily share, right? That they have some challenges.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's that,
Right.
There are a lot of, I don't want to say valid, but there are a lot of reasons people ghost that we might not have context for or understand, which is why
Right.
it's so hard, but they're not always with malintent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then Charmaine, we see your comment in the chat. Learn to not be surprised when people don't treat you the way you treat them. or give you the respect that you give them. Not everyone has the same values and integrity, right? Well said. Appreciate that comment.
Yeah, well, I just want to add right here that the other piece about this that becomes really important, and why it's so good to kind of, do the self-reflection, like Kay said, look at patterns and then really fall back into kind of centering yourself on what is good, is that while you're not surprised when people don't treat you well, it's still really important to be able to take in when people are. And sometimes that's a little harder if you've had enough experiences where people don't. You can't necessarily let your guard down. You can't necessarily enjoy that as much as you would have had those other experiences not happened. And so I think it's important to really take pleasure in the goodness that occurs. Because it's still there, right?
Right.
It's just not with the person who rolled out.
No doubt. So
Without letting you know after you talked 15 times. Oh, I'm sorry, I got a little caught up in my own. No, I'm
right,
joking.
right. I know we're at the time limit. We started a little late. We can extend it. Happy to answer any more questions, your comments, feedback. And I do want to share my tip for ghost busting, no doubt.
Go.
I do have a great tip for ghost busting, and I've tried it. It's worked.
Is it leave first? Because that wasn't the
Is it
tip
lead
that-
first? No, I was joking about you
Okay.
ghost them first, but here's what I've tried, and you can experiment. It's worked with me because I can be playful and jokey in text and conversation or even meetup. So I will literally bring up the topic of ghosting on a date, preferably in the very beginning, and saying, hey, I don't know what your thoughts are on ghosting, but it's very pervasive or prevalent in our society. If we don't work out, how would you like me to, how would you want to handle it? How would you like to find out? Or how would you like to tell me if you're not interested?
Mm.
And I've had a woman tell me, ghost me. I do not want to feel rejected. You have my permission to ghost me. And I was like, oh, that's the first.
But what does that mean? Then
She's
she's
like,
left with
don't-
the interpretation?
She's like, don't call me anymore if you don't want to get to know me. Just like ghost me. I'm perfectly cool. And that's all right. And it was a shock. I'm not joking. It surprised me. Everyone else said, hey, it's okay to let me know. And I would say, hey, in the spirit of dating transparency, I think you're great, but we're not a good fit.
Mhm, mhm.
I have no problem communicating. This is, or you can also sense it. I mean, you kind of both
If
know.
you're not a great fit,
Yeah,
sometimes you can both
you
sense it.
both
It's not even really
sense
ghosting.
it,
Y'all
yeah.
just both kind of fall
Everybody
off,
knows, like, hey,
That's-
you have
that's
to
the
say-
mutual
it's a
ghosting.
mutual
Yeah.
accepting. So it's like, I know, but we kind of talked about being friends and everybody's cool. But I literally had someone tell me, ghost me. And I should have dug deeper, but I was like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, if they're saying you can ghost me, you don't even really need to date. You're just like, all right.
I'm like, all right, girl,
Yeah.
well, it was nice talking to you.
Mhm.
Comment.
I don't think men will be honest and tell you whether or not they will ghost you in the future. They will tell you what they think you want to hear.
Good point. Fair enough. I agree. Some men may not share or tell you, but I think it's putting it on the table and seeing how they might handle it. And if they're mature, I mean, that, hopefully they have an open and honest conversation about it.
This goes back to kind of what we were saying initially too, right? How we handle situations.
Right.
Can be indicative of
Who you messing with?
if you want to kind of proceed with that person.
Wait.
It's certainly something to make note of, and it would certainly be a deep red
Right.
flag. Yeah.
Yeah, some men might not be honest. I think some women might not be honest, but in this case, the woman was very candid. She said ghost
People
might not be
can be dishonest.
correct. That would be the case,
Mhm.
right? But I think the other thing we talked about, there are a lot of potential reasons
Mhm.
why Diane gave a good one where, hey, this person wasn't ready, but that question, so why are you dating? But they thought they might be ready and couldn't tell you at the time, but had to come back a year later and be able to share that. It's still unfortunate, I think,
Mhm.
because you feel like, what the hell? Why did you disappear? I think that's the real thing.
The return of it, right? Even though we kind of have to
Right.
redetermine our own narrative
Mhm.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I think there is something nice about the person returning and you really being able to go, okay, check that off the list. That was not kind of the
Yeah.
traditional rejection go, oh, Charmaine, we got you. We know you
Yeah,
aren't
we know,
generalizing, man.
we know.
Yeah.
That's why we kind of corrected with the person's
Yeah, but
aspect. but,
that wasn't an assumption on our part at all. No.
Yeah, I also think though, when we talk about ghosting, ghosts tend to haunt sometimes, right?
Mhm.
They can come, yeah, they haunt us because in sessions I've had, it's hard to let go of what, may have happened in that situation. And depending, we talked about the layers and the severity, I suppose, the gravity of it. Yeah, it can be tough. And that's why you have to give yourself space and time sometimes to overcome that. And it's okay. It's okay to go through the range. I always encourage, hey, to give you the space and support in the journey of kind of healing as well as, growing from the experience as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes too, it's feels almost kind of harder to accept. There are those situations where you've been able to rely on a person months, years, whatever, they disappear. That's awful. And then I think in other situations where maybe the person doesn't date a lot, right? Where maybe it feels like there's just not a lot of options, right? If this person comes along and it seems to really click, I think that can feel much more disappointing than it might have been, not because you're hanging all your hopes on this thing, but much more disappointing than it might have been if you felt like, okay, well, I have to kind of process this and then I'm gonna get back out there, right? Like if you feel like, oh my God, but is there anything else out there? Is another thing that I've been hearing from clients who've been ghosted, that it feels a little bit more intense than it might, if the sense is that you can't just kind of process and then move on to these other options.
Yeah. Got a question.
Oh,
Are there any common signs or red flags that may indicate someone is prone to ghosting you?
you're asking me the question?
Yeah, that's a question. Are there any signs, any indicators, any warning lights one should recognize to prevent the ghosting or recognize this person is a ghoster?
I like how you decided they weren't ghosters anymore. They were ghosters, kind
Ghoster.
of like gangsters.
Gangster.
You know what I mean?
Ghost the
The gangsters of
They were
ghosting.
ghost the gangsters. Yeah,
Um,
any indications, any warning lights, any big ahas?
Listen, it could be far more simple, than what we're talking about. And by that, what I mean is that sometimes people show up very consistently. It feels awful when suddenly they just fall out. You're like, okay, I really don't get it. I can look at all these messages, right? But there are other times you start to get to know somebody, it seems cool. And then kind of like after talking with you every day for a week and messaging you and whatever every day for a week, now it's been 2 days and you're like, huh? And then they come back with a reason. You're like, okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's not like we've really known each other that long, right? And then after a couple of days, you notice something similar happen, or they're engaging with you, but they're not engaged, right? Like they're not present. They're kind of giving you a response just to kind of say they responded technically, right? Those are things that will make you go, okay, this isn't necessarily feeling like I initially thought it felt. And maybe I can't invest in as much in this because this kind of in and out could be indicative of something else.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would agree. There's not much, I don't think. I mean, really, it's tough to see because, it can happen at any point in time, depending on what that is driving the other person to ghost, right?
Yeah, and I think you've seen the range. You see where people who are really dismissive, who take people for granted, who et cetera. You see other times when people who are normally very thoughtful, who do the same thing. They, so it's
Yeah. I think another indicator might be the breakdown of communication, right? Yeah, communication is not flowing as easily or consistently as it was.
That's what you're saying.
That's what we're saying. So the communication, no doubt about it. Let's see.
Yeah, I would say sometimes as a general sign, it's always interesting to look at how people treat other people in their lives, how they talk about other people in their lives, and how they even treat strangers, right? And so if they're very sweet to you, but dismissive, impatient, insulting, whatever, to kind of other people around, it's also an indicator that there's more to the character than what you're seeing. That might be a person who eventually will ghost, right? But
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's not one of those things where you're like, I'm out, I know what they're about to do. Oftentimes you don't, which is why it's such a shocking experience. Now, some people get ghosted and they're like, whatever, wasn't the right one for me, save me from the trouble, and they really keep it moving. But I think that's like in any experience, right? We don't all respond in the same way. And our levels of resilience around kind of different things in different areas, might dictate different responses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
And I think definitely in the dating and relationship world, given the challenge of ghosting and there's a host of other things that are occurring. There's names for everything. There's
Yeah.
ghosting, there's mosting, there's submarining, there's
Ghosting.
gaslighting, there's mosting. Mosting is when you kind of love bomb and then you ghost. It's
Yeah,
most-
literally doing the most.
You're doing the most.
Oh,
Yeah,
I don't
that
listen.
happens.
I'm sorry. I didn't feel like they need to coin that phrase.
I
We
know.
covered that
Yeah,
under
exactly. It's
ghosting.
under ghosting, right?
Okay, it's mosted.
It's most,
But
but
still.
there's a term for it, because why would somebody just love bomb you and then disappear?
It's the same way that they do it. That's why we said ghosting is layered.
I agreed, I know, but
Yeah.
it feels like, wait, you just bombarded me with all this, stuff, and then now you just running. I mean, wait, hold on. Like, it's one thing because we're having problems and you don't want to tell me that you're not into me no more. Another thing to tell me you want me and then disappear. That's the thing.
Maybe there's something about kind of pouring out all that. I don't know.
Right.
Pouring out all that shit about like,
Psychological warfare.
right, all this stuff, right? Maybe there's something about that actually is feeding them.
No doubt.
There's a function of it that gives them something for whatever reason, and then they get it and they're like, all right, I got it.
I'm
Kind of like on to the next. And in that case, it really is much less about the person being mosted, which we kind of already know, because the point about mosting is that when you first meet somebody, for real, why are they like all up in your, like that? You know what I mean? They don't know you that well to be saying all that stuff to where you'd even believe it in the first place. Now you might be like, oh my God. And then they got me flowers, and oh my God. Then we got organic apples because they know I love the farmer's market. They really listen. If we've only been hanging out for a week and a half, come on, son.
I'm good, but not that good. Hold on.
Unless you're buying the flowers for traders, you should just save your money because
Right.
that's too quick.
Exactly.
Yep.
Relax, slow your
Yep.
roll.
Slow your roll.
But I do believe with all of these things, and I know we've coined terms to kind of define it because we like to give definitions to things, right?
Yes,
No doubt,
yes.
new constructs.
Labeling
think-
allows you to figure out how you're going to move forward around it.
Exactly, but I think there's a level of resilience that we need to have when it comes to dating, no doubt, because it's, it feels like psychological warfare. When somebody's trying to do this to you, it's like, are you trying to mess with me intentionally? Are you trying to, mess with my mind? Are you trying to manipulate to see what is the point of this? Where are we going?
But remember, this goes back to our conversation where we were talking about triangulation, remember? And how there is that going all the way in, right, to this other situation with this other person, feeling like you're feeling something very deeply when really kind of you're playing at what would feel deep, only to kind of get relief from the relationship you're actually in. You get that relief, you go back to your relationship. The person who you're mosting, you don't need them anymore.
Yep.
They were never central. There's nothing unique about them in comparison to you. You happen to walk in, the next person could have walked in, right? What's essential for them is what they need to do to feel comfortable returning to home base, marriage, long-term commitment, living together, whatever.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So we're coming up on 60 minutes almost. We know
Yeah.
we started a little late and we want to apologize again for the technical difficulties in starting late, but we're glad
Nobody
that
could
you,
get in.
yeah, you joined us. We joked a little bit about trying to ghost the audience, but it wasn't intentional. We weren't trying to leave you hanging.
Right.
But any last questions in the chat, or if anybody wants to speak, feel free. We'll open it up.
And please, if not about this, like we said last time, make sure you DM us if there's a topic that you really want us to cover. That we haven't covered yet. A lot of times we're looking at kind of what our clients are coming to us with, or what seems to be very pronounced, and that's what we decide to talk about. But I mean, when you look at the topics of relationship and love,
Yeah.
it's vast. So,
Very
let us
vast.
know.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, from a therapist point of view, coach point of view, we try to shed light on things. I tend to give a lot of personal experience to give real life examples, like the lady who told me to ghost her. I mean, that happened,
Mhm.
seriously. So I don't mind sharing, and you guys are welcome to share, but you're not obligated, but
Yeah.
feel free to ask
We
the
love it
hard
when you do.
questions. Yeah, ask the hard questions, share stories. We appreciate it. It brings some depth to the conversation, as well as gives us real life instances to talk about. So
Absolutely.
we're very appreciative of you guys supporting us, and we got some great things coming. You want to mention some of the things we might be thinking about doing in the future?
I do not, but I love the smooth way with which you try to, get me into that whole
Yeah.
thing.
So we've been pondering with our team, how do we bring this to life? And maybe for folks that are local to the area, we may start doing this in person with an audience, or bringing some folks to the gathering and having people join us for the coach and the therapist in conversation. And it's something we're considering, I like to say experiment, trying to experiment with, because I think people are zoomed out and social media
Zoomed
out and
out.
all the stuff. And we'd love to have the feedback and the energy and the audience, and give us a chance to network and, connect with each other.
But I think, that's what makes it that much more special, that y'all return and kind of show up for this experience, and make it an experience that's valuable, because everyone's busy. You are zoomed out. You may have never even been ghosted before, but you're like, oh, Chris and Kev, all right, you know what I mean? I'm with it. So as he said, we certainly appreciate it. There are great things coming. DM us with your topics and stay tuned.
Yeah,
We
but we're
thank
still gonna
you.
keep the online presence for the folks who are not local to the Los Angeles area.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're on the East Coast, the Southwest, I mean, we get it, we feel for you, but if you can come in, we don't mind. We'll have you, we'll entertain, of course, no
Yeah.
doubt, no doubt. So
Air mattresses are much more advanced than they used to be.
There you
I'm
go.
joking.
there you go. But let me check flights, Charmaine. Yeah, come on through, come on through. But how do we end, Chris? How would you like to end this ghosting?
I think I think really sincere appreciation. You guys knowing there's more coming, and there wouldn't be more coming if y'all didn't come back, right? We know there's value in it because we see you. And so we appreciate it. And look for us, DM us with questions, comments, topics. And we'll move from there.
Yeah, no doubt.
See y'all next month.
Thank you.